The year was 1942, a moment of precarious balance in the vast, sun-scorched theater of North Africa. The legendary Erwin Rommel, the Desert Fox, and his Africa Corps had driven the British Eighth Army back across the sands of Libya and Egypt. Confidence in the Axis camp was high, with the vital Suez Canal almost within their grasp. The fate of the Middle East, with its vast oil reserves, hung precariously in the balance. Yet, the British line had finally held at a previously obscure railway stop named El Alamein. This location was of immense strategic importance, a bottleneck for any advancing army. To the north lay the sparkling Mediterranean Sea, guarded by the formidable power of the Royal Navy. To the south stretched the impassable Qattara Depression, a vast, treacherous expanse of soft sand and salt marshes. This unique geography meant that Rommel's favorite tactic of a sweeping flanking maneuver was impossible. Any attack would have to be a brutal, frontal assault against a prepared and determined defense. In July, the first Battle of El Alamein had been fought, a bloody and inconclusive affair that halted the Axis advance. General Claude Auchinleck had successfully stopped Rommel, but at a great cost and without a decisive victory. Prime Minister Winston Churchill, impatient for a clear triumph, decided a change in leadership was necessary. In August, a new commander arrived to take charge of the Eighth Army, Lieutenant General Bernard Montgomery. Montgomery was a stark contrast to his predecessors. He was meticulous, cautious, and radiated an almost arrogant self-confidence. He immediately set about transforming the morale of the weary and often defeated Eighth Army. His famous declaration, "No more retreat," echoed through the ranks, instilling a new sense of purpose. He insisted on waiting until he had overwhelming superiority in men, tanks and guns before launching any offensive. The soldiers began to train relentlessly, practicing new tactics and familiarizing themselves with new equipment. This period of intense preparation and reinforcement saw the balance of power slowly but surely tip in favor of the Allies. Meanwhile, Rommel faced a growing crisis of his own. His supply lines, stretching all the way from Tripoli, were perilously long and vulnerable. The Royal Navy and the Royal Air Force were waging a relentless campaign in the Mediterranean, sinking ship after ship. Fuel, ammunition, and replacement tanks, the lifeblood of his Panzer army, were reduced to a mere trickle. Rommel, also suffering from poor health, knew he had to strike before the British grew insurmountably strong. He launched an attack at the end of August, aimed at the Alan el Halfa ridge. But Montgomery, anticipating the move, had prepared a trap. He used a defensive strategy, allowing Rommel's panzers to batter themselves against his heavily fortified positions. The new British 6-pounder anti-tank guns proved devastatingly effective against the German armor. The Battle of El Halfa was a costly failure for the Axis, a significant blow to the myth of Rommel's invincibility. With his army weakened and his health failing, Rommel flew to Germany for medical leave, leaving General Georg Stumme in command. The stage was now set for Montgomery's grand offensive, codenamed Operation Lightfoot. The plan was not for a swift, daring breakthrough, but a methodical, grinding battle of attrition. Montgomery intended to crumble the enemy's infantry defenses, forcing Rommel to commit and destroy his precious panzers. On the night of October 23rd, 1942, under the light of a full moon, the silence of the desert was shattered. A massive artillery barrage from over 1,000 British guns erupted along the entire front. The sound was a continuous, deafening roar that could be heard in Alexandria, 60 miles away. The ground trembled as shells rained down on the German and Italian positions. Under the cover of this creeping barrage, the infantry of the Eighth Army began their advance. Their first and most perilous task was to clear paths through the extensive Axis minefields. These formidable defenses, known as the Devil's Gardens, were a complex web of anti-tank and anti-personnel mines. The sappers, the engineers tasked with clearing the mines, worked under constant, murderous fire. Casualties were horrifically high as men fell to mines, machine guns, and mortar fire. The initial phase of the battle was a brutal, close-quarters infantry grind. On the second day of the offensive, tragedy struck the Axis command. General Stumme, while visiting the front line, suffered a fatal heart attack during an artillery bombardment. For a critical period, the Panzer Army Africa was effectively leaderless. Rommel, urgently recalled from his sickbed in Austria, rushed back to the chaos of the front. He arrived to find his army locked in a desperate struggle for survival. The British armor, the Crusader, and new Sherman tanks began to push through the cleared lanes. However, they ran into a wall of deadly German anti-tank guns, particularly the feared 88 mm flak gun. The desert became a graveyard of burning tanks, a testament to the ferocity of the fighting. The battle devolved into a series of intense and bloody localized engagements for key ridges and positions. Names like Kidney Ridge and Tel El-Isa would be forever etched in the memories of the men who fought there. Montgomery's crumbling process was working, but it was slow and incredibly costly. The Axis forces, particularly the Italian infantry divisions, fought with desperate courage but were being systematically destroyed. Rommel was forced to commit his panzer divisions piecemeal to plug the gaps in his crumbling line. This was exactly what Montgomery had intended, drawing the German armor into a battle of attrition they could not win. After 10 days of relentless grinding, Montgomery prepared for the final blow. He launched Operation Supercharge on November 2nd, a concentrated assault designed to shatter the Axis front. The attack was spearheaded by the elite 9th Australian and 2nd New Zealand divisions. They faced ferocious resistance, but their determination was unbreakable. This led to one of the largest and most decisive tank battles of the campaign. Sherman tanks of the Eighth Army clashed with the remaining German Panzer and IVs. Rommel, watching his last armored reserves being systematically destroyed, knew the battle was lost. His army was on the verge of complete annihilation, with virtually no fuel left to maneuver or retreat. He sent a desperate message to Hitler, requesting permission to withdraw and save what was left of his army. The reply from the Führer's headquarters was uncompromising and detached from reality. Hitler ordered the Afrika Korps to stand fast, to fight to the last man. For a day, Rommel attempted to obey the insane order, sacrificing more of his men for a hopeless cause. But facing the undeniable reality of total destruction, he made a fateful decision. On November 4th, in defiance of Hitler's direct command, Rommel gave the order to retreat. The Axis line finally broke, and the retreat quickly turned into a rout. The Royal Air Force, masters of the sky, harried the fleeing columns relentlessly. The coastal road back to Libya became a long, sorrowful trail of abandoned and burning vehicles. The victory at El Alamein was absolute and decisive. It marked the irreversible turning of the tide in the North African campaign. Churchill, in a famous speech, captured the significance of the moment perfectly. "Now this is not the end," he declared. "It is not even the beginning of the end. But it is, perhaps, the end of the beginning." For the first time in the war, the church bells rang out across Britain to celebrate a major land victory. The victory provided a massive, much-needed boost to Allied morale across the world. The threat to Egypt, the Suez Canal, and the Middle Eastern oil fields was permanently eliminated. The path was now clear for the next phase of the Allied strategy, Operation Torch. This involved the Anglo-American landings in Morocco and Algeria, to the west of Rommel's retreating army. The Axis forces in North Africa were now caught in a giant pincer movement. The final destruction of the once mighty Afrika Korps in Tunisia was now only a matter of time. The victory at El Alamein was not without a terrible cost. The Eighth Army suffered over 13,500 casualties, a grim testament to the battle's ferocity. Axis losses were catastrophic, with nearly 60,000 men killed, wounded, or captured. The desert sands would forever hold the memory of the thousands who fell on both sides. It was a victory forged not by brilliant maneuvers, but by overwhelming industrial might and logistical superiority. It was a triumph of meticulous planning, attritional warfare, and the sheer dogged determination of the common soldier. The Battle of El Alamein remains a defining moment in the history of the Second World War. It was the turning point that ended the Axis dream of an empire in North Africa, and it set the Allies on the long, hard road that would ultimately lead to victory in 1945. The desert wind howls over the silent battlefield, a mournful tribute to the fallen. The courage of the sappers who faced the Devil's Gardens is a story of quiet, desperate heroism. The roar of the 1,000-gun barrage marked a new scale of industrial warfare. The Sherman tank, though not perfect, arrived in numbers that overwhelmed the enemy. The Italian soldiers of the Folgore Division fought with incredible bravery against impossible odds. Montgomery's insistence on morale was as crucial as his accumulation of material. The sinking of the tanker Proserpino was a critical blow to Rommel's fuel supply just before the battle. The battle was a truly global effort, with soldiers from across the British Commonwealth and Empire. Air power of the Desert Air Force was a constant thorn in Rommel's side. The intelligence gleaned from ultra-decrypts gave Montgomery a significant advantage in planning. The physical environment of the desert was an enemy to both sides, with its extreme heat and biting cold. The flies were a constant, maddening plague for every soldier in the field. Water discipline was a critical aspect of survival for every man in the desert. The battle's end was not a clean breakthrough, but a messy, brutal collapse of the Axis front. The pursuit that followed was hampered by rain, a rare and unexpected event in the desert. El Alamein proved that Rommel, the master of maneuver, could be defeated by a methodical, overwhelming force. The psychological impact of the victory was immense, a beacon of hope in a dark time. Battle became a legend, a story of endurance and eventual triumph against a feared enemy. The silence that fell over the battlefield on November 5th was a stark contrast to the preceding days. For the veterans who survived, the memories of the dogfight would never fade. The battle was a testament to the importance of logistics, a war won by quartermasters as much as by generals. The German 88 mm gun, used in an anti-tank role, was perhaps the most effective weapon on the battlefield. The British 25-pounder gun howitzer was the versatile workhorse of the 8th Army's artillery. The Axis forces were a coalition of German and Italian units, with often strained relations. The Desert Rats, the 7th Armored Division, added to their legendary reputation at El Alamein. The Australian 9th Division's ferocious fighting was critical to the crumbling process in the north. The New Zealanders' final push in Operation Supercharge was the spearhead that broke the Axis line. The South African forces played a vital role in holding the southern sector of the line. Indian Army troops made crucial contributions, particularly in the brutal fighting on Ruizat Ridge. The Free French Brigade also fought bravely, holding the southernmost point of the Allied line near the Katara Depression. The battle was a complex, multi-faceted operation, far from a simple cavalry charge. The use of deception, including a fake pipeline and dummy tanks, helped mislead the Axis command. The night fighting was confusing and terrifying, illuminated only by muzzle flashes and star shows. The medical services worked tirelessly, saving countless lives in makeshift desert hospitals. The legacy of El Alamein is one of sacrifice, strategy, and the turning of a mighty tide. The initial infantry assault was a brutal, close-quarters affair in the dark. Clearing the Devil's Gardens was a nerve-wracking task performed under fire. The artillery's roar was a constant companion for the soldiers for days on end. The Axis defense was stubborn, built on years of combat experience in the desert. The battle for Materia Ridge was a key struggle in the crumbling phase. Rommel's return to the front could not change the fundamental material disadvantage he faced. The clash of armor in Operation Supercharge was the battle's brutal climax. The Axis anti-tank screen was a deadly and effective defense for much of the battle. The final retreat was a desperate flight to escape the closing trap. The victory was a triumph for the combined arms approach. Infantry, armor, and air power working in concert. Desert, once a stage for Rommel's genius, became the graveyard of his army. The battle's outcome was celebrated not just in London, but in Washington and Moscow as well. The strategic importance of Malta, the unsinkable aircraft carrier, was vital for interdicting Axis supplies. The experience gained at El Alamein would prove invaluable for the Allied armies in future campaigns. The battle redefined the scale of modern warfare, showcasing the power of industrial production. The name El Alamein would forever be synonymous with the decisive, tide-turning victory.